So we'll just jump into it, eh?
Yep.
All right. Welcome to Brolosophy. We're here with Rohan Connolly, football writer, father of Footyology. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Footyology?
Well, I can't think how else you'd pronounce it.
So, Rohan, thanks for coming on the show. I'm really keen to just hear your history and, devoting, your life to the game of AFL football.
Yep.
But firstly, just tell us a little bit about yourself, Rohan. Who is Rohan Connolly?
Oh, geez, that's a fairly broad brush way to start,
sure is,
isn't it?
mate.
Look, I think I'm pretty normal. I'm I'm Australian born, youngest of 4 kids. I'm married, divorced. I've got 2 kids, one adult, one nearly adult.
Mm-hmm.
I've repartnered. I've got a stepson. We live in southeast suburban Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
I have. I think I'm a passionate sort of person. So some people would say obsessive, but I have perhaps in some ways a narrow range of interests, but I'm very sort of passionate about all of them, and obviously sports one, and particularly football. But I do love my cricket. I love soccer. I've played most things: golf, tennis, etc., etc. So that's one stream. I'm huge on. I'm a big music head.
Yep.
But again, tends to be fairly narrow. I'm a bit of a rock pig,
Yeah.
So I love my headbang.
Where's your Iron Maiden t-shirt, mate?
No, I'm
didn't wear that one today.
Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, really? Rage Against the Machine?
Yeah. No, I've got.
I was a big Rage fan.
Well, I still am. I think I've got about 5 Rage Against the Machine t-shirts.
Yeah.
Actually, I do
Cool.
like my music t-shirts.
Yeah.
So, what else do I like musically? A lot of that Seattle stuff, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden. Like a lot of Australian rock, probably of an earlier vintage. What else? I'm into popular culture. Movies, TV. I am quite political. I take a keen interest in politics, and I get involved in that on social media, specifically Twitter, where my partner Abby would say I spend far too much time on. But now I'm thinking about it, most of those interests sort of stem from a family connection. What I mean by that is my father was a career journalist, and he started out basically as a sports journalist, a reporter and a production person, so a sub-editor and editor. He ended up actually being a film critic, and that covers another base. So he was a film critic for the last 20-odd years of his career. My eldest sister is also in film, or was in film. She was a documentary maker.
Cool.
Ended up running Film Australia, before that was wound up by the government of a day.
Oh, so you've got deep connections in all those things, really.
And musically speaking, my brother, who sadly is no longer with us, but he was a guitarist, and he played in a lot of bands around Melbourne, but probably most famously with Paul Kelly. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, Steve was the lead guitarist for Paul Kelly and the Cover Girls, and then Paul Kelly and the Messengers. So,
cool.
The iconic leaps and bounds film clip on the silos looking over the MCG. If you have a look at that, you'll see my brother there with his
strumming away,
his sunnies on and his black top, and he actually, mad Essendon supporter like me, he used to have a black Stratocaster with a red sash on it.
Yeah, right. I'm an Essendon supporter too,
Oh, eh?
Yeah, I'm a Bomber, so we'll get along good here. Imagine if I was a Collingwood supporter.
Oh, look, it
takes
takes all sorts. I don't know if there's that much to talk about with Essendon for the last couple of decades. But I
think there is.
Geez, I've spun this one out, haven't I?
No, it's good.
They're my interests, and I follow them all pretty passionately, and the media, obviously that's been my whole career, so I am passionately interested in the media as a whole, and I must say, lately quite despairing about the direction that's headed.
Yeah, no, for sure. I couldn't agree more on that. So as someone who's, you seem like a pretty all-round, pretty bog standard Aussie bloke.
Yeah.
Loves his family, loves his sport, loves Aussie rock, that kind of stuff. But and I mean that just in no negative terms, but for someone who kind of had a bit of everything growing up in sporting sporting and in the film and art and journalism stuff. What got you to lean into football?
It's a good question. It sort of came out of nowhere, really. I can remember being taken to my first game at the age of about 5, and we went sort of irregularly, but I was aware of it. And then I sort of remember this vividly when I was 7. For some reason, it coincided, and this is how old I am. It coincided with Essendon had been in the doldrums for a few years, and they got Des Tuddenham, Collingwood champion, to come across from Collingwood and be captain coach of Essendon. And so at the start of 1972, there was all this optimism about Tuddy coming to Essendon, and that sort of sparked my interest. And just like that, I started, first of all, listening to the games every week. And then the next season, 1973, I started going with Steve, who was my older brother, who was 6 years older than me. We started going every week. And I just became totally obsessive about it. I'd go to the games, I'd watch all the replays and all the panel shows. I would, and with my father being a journalist as well, I guess two things sort of converged. And I used to come home from games and write my own little match reports and draw pictures with them and stuff. Cool. And I was quite obsessive about it. And really from that age, in a career sense, I knew what I wanted to be, and that was a sports journalist. Wow. And in fact, I used to say I want to be the sports editor of The Sun. The Sun News Pictorial, which is now the Herald Sun. So, and that's where I started my career, on the Sun News Pictorial. So I was obsessive about it. It was the only thing I was ever interested in doing, and I came out of school and I was lucky enough to end up doing that. But the footy bug, it just absolutely floored me. And, I used to, I'm just trying to think of some examples of the obsessive behaviour. I had, one of the first books I was given was the Courage book of VFL finals, and it was, every year sort of talking about the finals and the scores and the details and whatever, and I would memorise every premiership winner. I used to, actually, I can rattle them off from about the early 40s now, but I used to be able to recite every premiership winner for every year. Stuff like that.
That was your party trick at the time.
I've got a bit of a Rain Man-ish sort of memory for footy, and I'm one of those people, and this still happens, that, important events, music of the time, whatever, anything can be linked back to a football match. So, first thing that comes to my head. So,
I know when Princess Diana died.
That was
from footy.
That's what I was about to say. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Really?
Yeah, because Essendon was playing Adelaide. It was the last home and away game of 1997. It was at Princes Park.
Yeah, would have been a Sunday morning, right? Sunday morning?
Yeah, it was a Sunday afternoon game.
Yeah, because it was Sunday, because I was junior footy. I was playing junior footy. It was Sunday, and people were walking around saying...
Well, people knew it had happened.
Yes.
And then I think about just before the game started, the news came through that she died. And but things like that, I sort of... football games tend to be my landmark.
That's funny, isn't it? I remember when Princess Diana died, and that was football. I remember things like that, but I guess I remember where I was, because I remember when Heath Ledger died.
Oh, yeah.
And I found that out. I remember exactly where I was, walking around a scaffold in Balnarring on this job site with my dad, and my buddy messaged me, and I went, what the fuck? But for me, I have landmarks, but for me, they're all wherever I was at the time. But you were just always at the footy.
Well, actually, it's funny you mention Heath Ledger, because I had a moment. It wasn't a footy thing.
Yep.
I was, funnily enough, and if you know me at all, incredibly unlikely, I was on the treadmill at a gym when the news came through that Heath Ledger had died. Yeah. So, like those moments in time. Funnily enough, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but 9/11, the night that happened, it was also the night that Matthew Lloyd was up at the tribunal after the qualifying final.
So you were like, where the fuck can I find what happened to Lloydie? What's all this news coverage?
Well, what happened was I saw that he got one game, so he was only going to play if Essendon made the grand final. And I got a call from my dad. I saw the name come up. And I thought that's what he's ringing me about.
Yeah.
So I pick up the phone. I go, we're fucked, And he was ringing to tell me, turn on your TV, because this has just happened. So, Yeah, most things have some sort of football connection.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I remember 9/11. Everyone remembers when they found out about 9/11. My dad rushed into my bedroom. How's this for parenting, right? I love my dad, he's a great bloke. But he ran into my bedroom, burst the door open and said, "Get out of bed, World War III just started."
Yeah. Well...
and I was like... What?
Yeah.
I was like 14.
Yeah, right.
I shit
Jesus,
myself.
you're young.
Yeah.
What I remember distinctly about it was, so my dad rings me and I rushed and turned on the TV, and of course the cameras are on the towers, and I see a plane go into the second tower, and I thought that they were replaying...
So you saw that
the
live,
first one. I saw that live.
Fuck,
and
that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it took that moment to register. Shit, that's another one.
Yeah,
It's that is still, I mean, hopefully in a way, like if there's ever any more dramatic news footage than that, it will be World War III.
That's right. Let's hope that is the craziest thing that we ever have to see in our lifetime.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right, cool. So what's it like? You remind me of a bloke... or like hearing your story and knowing a little bit more about it now. It's only been 5-10 minutes, whatever. But you remind me of a bloke named Ariel Helwani. He's a MMA reporter.
Oh, yeah.
And he started off, and he's not a MMA practice. I mean, I think he rolls a bit of jiu-jitsu or whatever. He's a Jewish French-Canadian bloke, I think, right? I think that's his heritage.
Yeah.
And anyway, he just loved MMA so much. And because I'm a big MMA fan, big footy fan, I played footy, whatever. NBA and mixed martial arts,
right.
UFC.
You're very representative of the younger generation, American sports and mixed martial arts, etc.
Yeah. So, and Ariel Helwani, he started off as just like kind of that reporter that you just be like, who is this bloke? He'd go to all the press conferences, ask good questions, and you'd always see his face. But you go, who does this bloke work for? Like, what's he doing? Like, who is he? And he just kind of hustled his way to his dream scenario and his dream life. And now, because Conor McGregor's fighting on Sunday, and it's the first fight he's had in a while, and I was watching the content around that last night, and I watched Ariel Helwani interview Conor McGregor on ESPN.
Yeah.
Like he's living his best life, but what I'm interested in is, because I saw Ariel Helwani, because I've been an MMA fan forever, I saw him work his way up to where he is now and whatever. But what's it like coming into a career in journalism? And obviously your dad would have been helpful, I guess, but like, what is it like coming out of school and trying to become a journalist? Is it tough to get work? Do you have consistent, like 40-hour-a-week salary kind of stuff there, or like how did it look?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's so long ago. It's just an entirely different world now, and I would say it's harder to get into the media now because it's just the media's so contracting content, and there's so many more people trying to be part of it. Look, it was pretty conventional with me. I came straight out of high school. And that's one thing that's changed. I mean, basically now the newspapers, and I'm sure most people, they take on uni graduates, so you've done a journalism or media degree or something. I just came straight out of HSC. In fact, when I started working on The Sun, I was still 17. I didn't turn 18 until a couple of months into the year. It was, I mean, we're talking about 1983. It's a long time ago. So I can remember my first year I was what they called a copy boy, which was like a messenger, not just a messenger, but you'd run a lot of errands, but you'd also get to do some writing and stuff as well. And it was a great introduction into how the whole newspaper process worked. I used to get $105 a week clear, and that was my weekly salary. I was still living at home then, so it was enough. But there were plenty of opportunities. I was quite lucky that first year. I made it known very early in the piece, I wanted to be on sport. The training for most young journalists then was that you would get a taste of everything. So that meant general news reporting, police rounds, courts, politics, parliament, stuff like that. I basically did a bit of general reporting, but then as soon as there was an opportunity, they stuck me in sport.
Yeah, really.
And for whatever reason, the Sun sports staff of that time, so we're up to about sort of late 84 here, they were quite, funnily enough, sort of short-staffed. So I went in ostensibly the cadet that went on to sport, cadet journalist, and it rotated, would be their role would be covering district cricket and VFA football. Now, VFA football, it's sort of like
VFL
now.
Yep, second grade football.
Exactly. And I thought, fantastic, and I did that, but they were short-staffed enough so that I also got thrown. I did a VFL game every week. I ended up doing Sheffield Shield cricket and some international cricket. And then a huge thing for me, at the start of 1985, they said, you're going to be Lou Richards' ghost. So Lou Richards, it's hard to impress upon people of your age just how big Lou Richards was. He was the Eddie Maguire of bigger, in fact.
The Johnny Cash to American listeners, kind of like the...
and Lou was a former footy champion who'd gone into the media. Everyone knew Lou. You know, he was the Sun. He was on the Sun. He was Channel 7, World of Sport. Anyway, I got to ghost Lou Richards, and for a year... I would drive around with Lou, helping him do his interviews and writing his stuff with him. And
so you're like his squire.
Yeah. And Lou, geez, Lou was great to work with. He had a fairly healthy ego, but, he could laugh at himself, and he was never shy of sort of pumping you up as well.
Yep.
And he was just fantastic to me. And I'll never forget, for example, the first time I met Ted Whitten, the great E.J. Whitten. We were out, Lou and I had gone to Footscray to interview someone, and Teddy was just sort of roaming the corridors as he did, being Ted Whitten. And Lou goes, Teddy, hey, come and meet the young fella, and Ted Whitten does his famous handshake where he used to virtually pull people off their feet. But I'm standing there, this sort of 19-year-old kid standing between Lou Richards and Ted Whitten, and I was just like,
how'd it get here?
Does it get any better than this? Right. It was a great introduction to journalism and to sports journalism particularly. And basically, when my time was supposed to be up on sport, they left me in sport. And I stayed at the Sun until 1987. And then I went to The Age and ended up staying at The Age for 30 years until mid-2017.
Unbelievable. So in those early days, how much of getting that start do you put down to luck, and how much do you put down to talent, and how much do you put down to hard work?
Well, as far as getting into the industry is concerned, I'd like to think I did it under my own steam. I had pretty good HSC marks. I was very interested. My general knowledge was good. It certainly helped that my father was and sorry, here's the other thing I need to explain. My dad worked for the Herald, the old evening newspaper in Melbourne, the Herald, which was massive in the 60s, 70s, and the Sun News Pictorial and the Herald were both part of the same company, the Herald and Weekly Times, and were in the same office. So a lot of the people making the decisions on these things knew my dad very well, and Dad was far more popular than I was. People used to, even when I was...
We would have had 20, 30 years on you, let's be honest.
But even when I was a kid and far less cynical and sort of grouchy than I am now, people would come up to me and go, "Oh, geez, I can't believe you, Dad, son. He's so nice."
You're like, hey, you know what? Fuck you.
So that, that didn't hurt. But yeah, look, I was interested and I was passionate, and I'd like to think I was pretty knowledgeable. And I could write, you know, so it's a reasonable combination. Like over the years, people say, what does it take to be a journalist? Well, there's no sort of magic formula. It's being interested in the world around you. It's being well read. General knowledge, I can't stress that enough. General
knowledge.
Yeah, well, it's okay to specialise in particular areas. But who knows, like even today, you might be a sports reporter sitting on sport and then a bomb goes off in the middle of a city. Well, it's all hands on deck, and your purer journalistic skills have to come into play. So that's part of it as well. And just having a curiosity about the world around you. So, I'd like to think I did it under my own steam, and then I'd like to think I, sort of proved I had talent. And
of course, you're not going to be in the industry for 45, whatever, 30, however many years without being able to prove the talent.
Well,
I just mean that start that you got, because that start seemed like obviously you had talent, obviously you would have had to work hard, but it seemed like you got a bit of luck. You know what I mean? With the Teddy Whitten and the Lou Richards stuff, and getting to that, especially with the Lou Richards, you're like, wow, this is such an opportunity to learn from just one of the best and one of the most respected, and be put in those places and meeting those people that you would have been meeting with Lou. It sounds like just you wouldn't have got anywhere without talent and hard work, let's be honest. But with a bit of luck, it probably got you a really good start, I feel like.
And also, I think having good teachers and mentors, and that's another thing. I've always, my whole career, really tried to be a good mentor, or, if someone asks me for advice or whatever, I'll always happily give it. I have a lot of people, even now, sort of email me out of the blue and say, can I talk to you about getting into the media? And I try to sort of make myself as available as I can, because I think what it was like for me and how much I benefited from
100%.
people passing on their knowledge. And that helps the whole industry sort of survive and be of a high standard.
Yeah, well, you're just giving back to what people gave to you.
Yeah.
I've done very little in business, but I have people. I run my own business. I've run a couple of businesses. I have people ask me for advice, and I had some amazing mentors, and I'll always the same. I'll say, yeah, man. I'll say, beware of false prophets, but you can take as much of my time as you like. I'm happy to give it. Just, I don't know what I'm fucking really talking about, but so that's really great. I'm a little bit hesitant to go down this track right now in this part of this conversation, but I'm going to anyway. So you spent a lot of time in obviously journalism and news, and obviously with your father's background and so forth as well. And I want to just go back to something that you mentioned very early in talking about introducing yourself, and where news is at now. Because I don't watch the news anymore. And I'll tell you why, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. But I remember sitting at my house. This is one of those other points where you remember it perfectly where you were. Not that, but it was just a big one for me. I remember sitting in my lounge room, and I had the TV on, and I was just doing whatever. I was by myself, and I remember the news came on, and it was newsflash. Family of 4 have died. Mother drives her car accidentally off the road and hits a tree, and all her family have died in a ball of flames. And I was like, and I'd already been thinking down this route. I was like, how the fuck does that benefit me, them, or the general public? And I've had a friend who was living with me who was a journalist, and she explained to me, like, there is things that you need to know, and there's things that there's like some sort of a saying, like there's things that the public need to know, and there's things that the public should know, and it's got to be a mix-up between the two, whatever. But I just feel like it's all trash. Really? I feel like the news, journalistic in newspapers and on most Channel 7, Channel 9 news reports or whatever, it's 80-20 bad, and it's all, most of it is stuff that we don't, not most of it, but more than half of it is, I think, is stuff that we don't need to know. You know? What do you think is going on with the news? Like, where do you think it sits? Because you're obviously passionate about it, because you mentioned something about it earlier.
Well, if you've got to spare a couple of days. I mean, it's firstly, it sort of depends on the platform, right? So when you were talking about the car crash thing, I was thinking there's a famous old saying in newspapers, if it bleeds, it leads. Meaning,
bad news sales.
Bad news. Yeah, exactly.
Effectively.
Lead being lead story. You know. TV news is very, for obvious reasons, very vision driven. So there might be something that the news on its own isn't a big deal at all, but the pictures are very compelling. So that, again, that's how that works. That is happening a lot more now online. So, if there's video of stuff, it might be, there's 100 examples, like it might be someone gets into a Barney over a shopping centre car park. Someone pulls out their phone and films it. Well, if you're reporting, 2 people had a fight over a car park spot, well, of course that's not going to be in the newspaper. But if you've got a video of 2 middle-aged women going hammer and tongs, So the technology has sort of, in part, changed the focus of news. Where I get... there's so many things I get cranky about in terms of where the media's gone. One of them is, and I was thinking about what you were saying, so there are a lot of stories that they do have some element of appeal to the public through almost voyeuristic reasons, and they can be, fatalities, car accidents, spectacular misadventures, those sorts of things. Do we need to know them? No, we probably don't. And particularly today, what would you have if you weren't having that? Well, ideally, you would have things that were informing us about stuff we really need to know more about, i.e., and yes, I've been banging this drum a lot lately, climate change. The amount of, and hey, don't get me wrong, I don't know nearly enough about it, but I've certainly, and particularly given what's been going on the last month in Australia, I've become a lot more informed and passionate about, the sort of things that need to happen in this country if we're to help preserve our bloody where we live for future generations. So there's a lot of things like that should get far more media coverage than they do. They don't, because media organisations are always sort of treading. They have to remember the commercial imperative. They have to be, to an extent, driven by their readers. And unfortunately, I've been in the midst of these discussions. There are stories, not just on climate change, but political stuff or, sort of corruption type stories that are quite involved and detailed and take some telling. And they might be really important stories for people to know about, but if they can't be told in a, what they say, sexy manner, so entertaining reading or the stories are personalised, sort of told through individual voices. There tends to be a bit of a sort of snooze factor with the public at large. And it's newspapers particularly have increasingly found this difficulty in that there's been almost a separation in objectives between the print editions of newspapers and their online versions. Actually, it's sort of coming back together now through the reason that the print editions, unfortunately, are sort of reducing in quality. But, there'd be days where you could pick up The Age and what was the main story on page 3, really prominent story. You'd go online and it'd be right down the bottom of the page. Why? Because it was sort of dull but worthy. It was dry and there was nothing particularly sexy about it. In contrast, there might be a story given huge prominence online, which was, I don't know, Miley Cyrus does a racy video and shows a nipple, that sort of stuff. That wouldn't be a story in the newspaper, but online, wow, we've got pictures and we've got a video and this sort of stuff. So the priorities have sort of been skewed by that. And, I mean, if you have a look at TV, I think back to even in the 80s, when I was a sort of young adult, if you had a look, I always say this to people, if you had a look at a nightly television guide for Melbourne or wherever, city in Australia, from the mid to late 80s, and put it side by side with one now, free to air I'm talking about, you'd be staggered. Like back then you still had plenty of current affairs shows, the news was a lot more serious. There'd be, sort of quality documentaries, movies. And then I literally don't watch free-to-air TV now apart from sport because it's just wall-to-wall reality TV. And
trash again.
I do a podcast. One podcast I do is called Ruck and Roll, and it's with Brian Mannix from Uncanny X-Men and Kevin Hillier, DJ, career DJ. And we often talk about the state of TV, and every time you sort of say some new ridiculous show comes on, you go, well, can it get any worse? Well, 3 months later, well, yes, it can, because, you had what was it, Lego Masters, people building stuff out of Lego. Apparently it rated its socks off. And then you had what was that one recently, The Masked Singer, people dressed up in giant lobster costumes.
What about Married at First Sight?
Oh, all that shit, and
oh my God.
And people get sucked into it. And then what I really hate the most about it is, even if you don't watch it, that stuff now is the subject of enormous amounts of print journalism on the major websites, recaps of the episodes. So I have literally never watched a second of reality TV, but I can still tell you who these people are. I can still tell you who ends up winning the Bachelor. And I hate the fact that I know. I'm almost, someone asked me 2 weeks later and I know the answer and I say, get out of my head. I don't want to know that, So again, sorry, very long-winded
No,
explanation.
it's all right.
But
Yeah, no problem.
in summary, I'd say, the news has been cheapened. I hate the focus on celebritydom,
Yep.
and the obsession with, even in a football sense, wags, what the wags are doing, and Rebecca Judd, doing...
The whole celebrity thing's ridiculous, really.
Look, I hate it.
I saw what happened the other day. Someone signed a new contract in the NBA.
Yeah.
And I'm a massive NBA fan.
Yeah.
And the boys... Oh, that's right. Anthony Davis knocked back 160 million for 4 years because he can get 5 years over 200 next year on the free agent market. So he didn't re-sign with the Lakers.
Yeah.
And my mates, we have a little basketball thread on Facebook, and they messaged me, AD knocked back the Lakers. And we know that he'll probably sign again next year, but he just wanted to have the max deal over 5 years. And then I sat there and I was like, I remember writing, that's fucking ridiculous, isn't it? $160 million. I said, I fucking love Anthony Davis. He brings me so much joy watching him play basketball, but pay him a few million a year.
Oh, look, it's... I mean...
You know what I mean?
Oh, it's
like, considering what is going on in the world.
It's absurd.
Climate change, for example. Like, there's fuck all money that goes towards climate change. Take 147 of Anthony Davis's 150 million, or 200 million, and put it towards things that actually matter. You can't... It's all, economically driven because that's what the NBA make and the players are the product. So I get it. I understand it. But it's just... The system's dumb.
It's obscene. And this is why... I mean, not specifically that, but I mean, my political background is to the left because my parents, I guess they sort of grew up with the Second World War as a backdrop, and they were hard times, and they were very big on social justice and people being given a fair go, and. Unfortunately, I think whilst this country talks a lot about the land of the fair go and whatever, frankly, these days, it's bullshit. And I think, I'm getting right off the track here. Well, for me...
We're not here to talk about footy, by the way. We're here to talk about whatever. I enjoy this stuff,
Well, for me, a real turning point for this country was the mid-90s. I mean, specifically 1996, the election of the Howard government, the rise of Pauline Hanson the first time around. So you had this country basically rejecting the agenda of the Paul Keating government, which was sort of outward-looking, seeking to expand our horizons into Asia and beyond our own borders, progressive in terms of, putting things on the agenda like becoming a republic, the flag, stuff like that. All those things are important to me in terms of Australia being a modern, progressive, outward-looking country. And people, for whatever reason, people got sort of twitchy and nervous about all that and said, we're not focusing on our own backyard. John Howard, to his credit, very smart politically, sort of seized upon that, and comfortable and relaxed was his mantra. But it was all about sort of almost drawing down the curtains. Plus, at the same time, you had the emergence of Pauline Hanson and the failure, I think, of that government and of the media, again culpable, to slap that down and not give it oxygen. And the media has, with Hanson, the media has done that several times since. She's been sort of dead in the water politically, and then she bobs up on Dancing with the Stars or Sunrise, use her as a credible panellist. There she is again the other day parroting absolute dribble about climate change is crap, blah, blah, blah. So, sort of that racist bent that, to be perfectly honest, I think is a sort of latent streak in the Australian psyche, much as I hate to say it. I think that gets tapped into by people like that, and it gets given licence and it becomes legitimised.
Yeah.
The other big problem with that, vis-a-vis the media, is you have one media organisation in this country, Newscorp, owned by Rupert Murdoch, that owns more than 60% of the entire country's media.
Yeah.
And they get to basically set the agenda. And whereas once Murdoch was always a very political animal, but in a way that served his business interests, I think as he's got older and less... the money has become slightly less of a concern for him, and it's about ideology. And as he's got older, he has become even more hardline right-wing. And his papers now are pursuing agendas that are quite nakedly obvious. So it's not just the amount of commentary, which is a lot more, but the editorialising within news stories, the selections which are made about news, the sort of decisions which stories to push and which to ignore. E.g., the other day when the latest opinion polls came out and Morrison's approval rating as PM had plummeted, that is a big story, or it has been. The Age and other media outlets gave it the sort of space it warranted. I got on the Herald Sun website and it was down on the third scroll down page because they didn't open it for comments either. That sort of stuff. So and when it comes to climate change particularly, this is what I'm most pissed off with News Corp about. People like Andrew Bolt, Chris Kenny.
What a moron.
They are people who are out of step with popular opinion. Now, a majority of people in this country believe that we do need action on climate change. You've got Andrew Bolt writing on a daily basis that it's a hoax, it doesn't exist. The amount of coverage that those views get, and then unfortunately they get perpetuated among people who aren't as interested or aren't as driven to find out for themselves. So they just start parroting the same old denialist crap.
Yeah, well, the thing is, nowadays, everything's fed off an algorithm. So people might go and read the newspaper and agree with a point that Andrew Bolt came out with, and then they'll go on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, and probably YouTube is the best example rather than the other two, and then they'll watch more climate denial or right wing or whatever it is. I'm not just using climate change, but I'm using that as the example.
Yeah.
But and then they'll get fed more of what they like. There's no getting fed, and it's all through an algorithm. Yeah. It's all autoplay. So there's so much YouTube that people watch.
Yeah.
This is one of the other problems I think that with news is you don't get the other side because for one, there's people like Rupert Murdoch who own 60% of the newspapers in Australia. So, and then two is the algorithm problem. So, but didn't there used to be laws against owning that much of the newspaper and like fair laws against
cross ownership laws? Yeah, I mean you couldn't own more than there were various things like you couldn't own a paper in the same city as a major free-to-air TV network, or there couldn't be a total monopoly. Those laws were basically thrown out by, trying to remember which government it was, but, in the fairly recent past. In fact, it might have even been Turnbull. Might be recent. That relaxing that allowed a further concentration of media ownership. So the diversity of opinion is even narrower.
Yeah.
And you mentioned social media. Like I'm big. I love Twitter. Way too much time on Twitter, but Facebook to me is a cesspit. That is where your craziest sort of alt-right conspiracy theories emerge and are given licence and are spread far and wide. And we've seen in the example of the US election in 2016 how big an impact the spreading of fake news, like genuine fake news, had on that election result. So things like that, the contraction of the media and media moguls having too much power, all those things sort of nip away at the fabric of healthy democracy. And that's another issue I see with this country now, that the range of opinion is so narrow now, and I think we risk having the fundamental principles of our democracy eroded because not enough people are being given the information they deserve to be able to access.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, isn't it? History is written by the winners or the people that own the rights to print the newspapers. You know what I mean? So it's fascinating to me that, because Facebook, for example, have gotten in trouble in the past for pushing their own agendas. Twitter cancel people in the hard right, but they won't cancel anyone in the hard left because they're a leftist-leaning, media organisation. And these are the biggest media organisations in the world. Rupert Murdoch it's not a social media platform, but he owns, obviously, all the media in Australia. So surely, like, just to skip forward 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, surely there's got to be some mechanism that is put in place that stops this from happening. Because if you control the news, you control the people, really. That's part of controlling the society, the culture and the society.
Well, I tend to think it'll happen more by sort of osmosis than by legislation.
Yep.
I think, I mean, Murdoch, look, it feels like he's going to live forever. He's not going to live that much longer. But Lachlan, the son who's going to sort of take over, a lot of people say that his politics are even worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, the media has such an issue now generating enough revenue that I think there may not be a lot of those sort of mogul type organisations. They may divest themselves of enough media interest because there's no money in it.
Yep.
So like News Corp, for example, have poured a lot more money into entertainment, Fox Studios and TV and stuff like that, and they've got out of a lot of newspaper stuff. And the newspaper stuff they hang on to and the sort of pure media stuff they hang on to tends to be sort of a vanity project type thing, which, for example, the Australian newspaper, which has been going since 1964, it's always run at a loss.
Yep.
But Murdoch has been prepared to sustain the losses because he wanted to have a national broadsheet, you know.
What does a national broadsheet mean, just so I know? Because I don't really know what the difference is.
A broadsheet is just the size of the paper. So, in fact...
Like the Age used to be.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I think the Oz might be the last surviving broadsheet in this country. That's just the size.
Okay, cool. Is there any difference?
In what, the size?
I know that there's a size. I know the size difference.
Quality?
No, just in like the way, say you read a broadsheet, you read the old Age, or you read like, is there any difference in the way like that, or is it just a paper that's printed on bigger paper?
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously the layout's different depending on the page. I mean, there was a philosophical thing that broadsheet papers were more serious and appealing to a more intellectual audience than
what people
tabloid.
always thought of the Age compared to the Herald Sun, obviously.
Yeah. But I mean, the difference, don't get me wrong, I love the Age, I love my time there, but even in terms of content and audience, there's the gap between the Age and the Herald Sun has been vastly reduced. They're not that different newspapers now.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and you were telling me before the show, so we've gone right down this rabbit hole, so we may as well stick around here for a little bit longer. But so you're talking to me about you're quite passionate about climate change. I think it's a funny situation, isn't it? Because I remember who was it? One of our journalists, who was it? Can't remember who it was, but one of the Australian journalists, middle-aged, kind of like, he was probably like 50-odd years old, and he was talking to one of the protesters outside the climate rallies 2 months ago or whatever. And all he was doing was taking the piss out of the climate activists. He's like, "Oh, you didn't need to work today, did you, mate? Or what are you doing? You got nothing better to do?" And he's like, "Oh, no, the activist was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just don't think there's anything more important. I have a job." He's like, "Oh, yeah, you and your, what do you think? Why do you think you can go and ruin people's days? Look at these people over here. There's traffic jams up here. These poor people can't get to work." And the climate activist was like, "Yeah, but with all due respect, sir," who was it? Fuck. And anyway, he's like, with all due respect, sir, like, there's bigger problems than people getting to work. And it's funny because I think people will get fired up. Like my uncle was posting in a family Facebook group about climate change, and he's very right wing. Climate change is this, that, and one of the things he was talking about, I had to stay quiet in the group because I just would have turned into a shit show. Was all these young kids. This is the narrative I keep hearing. All these young kids, they're coming to us with protests, but they're not coming to us with answers. I was like, it's not their fucking job to come up with the answers. It's their job to make the noise and say, "Hey, you guys fucking start coming up with the answers." And there's a funny thing. So just to finish up, I want to get your thoughts. But so I've got a group of mates, another Facebook group, my buddies, and they're really conspiratorial, and they're all pretty right-leaning, in especially when it comes to climate change, especially one of them. And they're my mates, so that's cool. But yeah, forget my point. But there's a book over here, because everyone's kind of climate change this, climate change that. There's a book on my bookshelf called The Sixth Extinction, and it's about the 6 extinction level events for the flora and fauna of Earth. And this is over 4 billion years since the start of Earth, start of the planet. So, and it traces back. It's like, I forget all the titles of the eras, but it's like, the Triassic and the Jurassic and the fucking whatever. And there's 5 of them. And then there's a 6th one, and it's like asteroid, volcanoes, human beings. We're in the absolute midst. And this is not the climate warms, this is the climate naturally warms, or there's a narrative getting pushed by the left, or blah, blah. This is statistical data that shows that our impact over, because it's judged on like the flora and fauna of the planet over the course of like 50 years. It's not like a 2-year thing. That's like the sample size or whatever, and whatever it categorizes, like 30% of the world's flora and fauna will die in the 50 years total. And we're in the middle of that, the 6th version, and it's purely brought upon by us. And it's just like, I also get quite frustrated by it. And I think part of, I'm going on a bit of a rant now, but I think I've just got in the back of my mind, I'm wondering whether, I think there's a rise in mental health issues, anxiety and depression and so forth. And I think part of that is more reporting, because this day and age it's okay to tell someone about it. So I think that is a genuine part of it.
Yeah.
But I think two other parts that I think have the biggest impact is social media, and the other one is, and I'm just really getting my head around this idea, but I really think that a lot of people are fucking unhappy subconsciously because they know that if the news is telling you we're past the point of no return, we're fucking it for the next generations, we got 50 years till it's fucked, that's subconsciously not going to make people happy.
No, I mean, there's a bit of territory there, but I think that's right. I think there's a part of the denialism comes from a can't bear to concede that this is actually happening, because what are the shocking ramifications of that? In terms of, saying to the protesters, all you do is complain about it, what are your solutions? Well, this is what annoys me about the blowback towards Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Who, I mean, you've got to step back from the issues for a moment. You've got a 16-year-old autistic girl who is basically being harassed and bullied by middle-aged adults. What? Since when has that been okay? But it's the nature of the blowback against her is, she's not proposing any solutions. She's just saying we've got to stop killing the planet. Well, first, that's a pretty decent message, is it? But secondly, exactly what you said before, and this is where my sort of philosophy too. I don't know any solutions, but the scientists have been telling us this shit for 30 years. We now have something like, it's actually higher than 97%. I'm told now the scientific consensus on man-made climate change is now 99% of informed career scientists who do this stuff. It's their bread and butter. They are telling us, and have been for some time, that we have to stop relying on fossil fuels. We have to seek renewable energy sources. We have to, reduce our consumption of certain foods and eat less meat. Stuff like
animal
that.
agriculture.
Well, I mean, some of the solutions are quite dramatic, but we're being told this by science, and there's absolute acceptance of that in the scientific world. Why are people so scared of accepting that?
Yeah.
These are the same people who would never question science when it comes to
religion.
Medicine.
Medicine.
Except anti-vaxxers, but they're a tiny, tiny minority. I mean, we're told penicillin is good for you; it'll make you better. Okay, I take it. No one questions that.
Yeah.
No one questions the, however long we've known now that the world is round and not flat. No one questions that.
Yeah.
Because that was a theory or a truism that was arrived at by scientific consensus. Why this one? Well, a number of reasons. There are greater economic ramifications out of this, but also I think that thing of disbelief. It's sort of like the scale is too big, the implications are too dramatic. That people sort of can't. How do I deal with it? Well, I'm going to shut my eyes and close my ears and go la 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 la.
Well,
and hope it goes away.
The first step isn't the first step of, what is it? What's the continuum of the 7 or 8 or whatever steps of like accepting something? And the first stage is denial. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, you mean like Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yeah.
I don't know. Fortunately, I'm not a pisshead, so I've never had to know what those steps.
Who cares? But back to but back to Greta Thunberg, or however you pronounce the second name, because I actually don't know.
I think it's Thunberg.
Thunberg,
Thunberg.
Yeah. I saw her interviewed on It was like Alan or Oprah or something like that.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, you know, you're really doing a great thing, and blah, blah, blah. How's it been? We've seen you been in America trying to inform people of your thoughts on the whole matter, and you've been over to Australia and so on and so forth. How is it different in Europe? What is the vibe in Europe in terms of climate change?" And she's like, "Oh, it's very different." She's like, "No one debates it in Europe because we believe in science." Like, that's what she said to Oprah, and it was just like, I fucking remember seeing it, and I was like, oh my God. Like, you could not have said that anymore perfectly.
I'm going to say something here that will probably, I don't know, I mean, you know, I could be run out of the country, but I mean, I was in Europe recently for close to a month. Straight after the end of this footy season, I went to Europe. We went to Crete and Croatia.
Crete's great.
And
I've been in Crete.
Yeah, beautiful. I love Germany as well. But I've done the Europe thing a few times now, and every time I do it now, I end up thinking they are so much more adult than us. You know, there's a sort of sophistication about their thinking. You don't ever see, well, I didn't anyway, in Europe, you don't ever sort of come across bogans. You know, there's sort of no equivalent.
Yeah.
Everyone appears sort of informed about things. There's a maturity about, I mean, the fact that, you know, people talk about the nanny state here, but, you know, the fact that there's no question about taking a drink out of a bar there because people know no one's going to carry on like a fuckwit, you know, whereas here,
That's right.
someone takes a drink
That's
out,
right.
you know, smash the glass.
binge
and
drinking.
there's a real sort of, I don't know, is it lack of sophistication or is it immaturity or what about this country? And, you know, it can be funny and it can be irreverent and whatever, but I think in a philosophical sense, it's starting to cost us because issues like this we refuse to take seriously. And, you know, we talk about our rebelliousness and stuff as a country, but in a way I think we're quite conformist. I mean, we had the chance to become a republic in 1999 and we turned our backs on it because for some reason some people didn't want to cut ties with the mother country. You know, our flag, I mean, I know it's symbolic, but I'm big on this. Our flag has another fucking country's flag on it. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's
you know,
funny,
like
isn't it?
so how can you say we're rebellious and independent and you know, sort of feisty and whatever when we won't stand on our own 2 feet? We won't think about these issues. You know, and that depresses me, frankly. And look, people go to Europe and come back and say stuff like this, and everyone, the natural reaction is to go, "Oh, you wanker." Well, if you don't like it, piss off.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I might end up doing that because there are certain things about this country, the way it's sort of gone as a nation, which I find profoundly depressing. And look, I love footy. I'm going to be hard to find footy somewhere else in the world, but I might just get to a point where I think that's a sacrifice I'm prepared to make.
Well, my dad's cousin was the president of the Milwaukee Bombers. So
I
was going to go over there and coach one at one point. Was one of my ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is. I don't really get too much deep into the Australian political. I can't speak to too much of what you're talking about, but I have thought a lot about our culture and society as a whole, like human beings, and I really believe that we're doing it wrong. We're doing it really, really wrong, and a lot of it's too hard to undo. You know, the amount of people in the world, the fact that we live in secluded little office units, and we work in office cubicles and stuff. We're supposed to be community-driven, you know, tribal people, and we're fucking it all up. But agriculture fucked it for us by letting us grow so quickly and so fast, and now we're you can't undo it. You know, so we're in a real tricky situation, but. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. So, fingers crossed. We're pretty. You know, there's a lot of ingenuity going around in the human race. So hopefully we can, right in the nick of time, figure our way around it, and then hopefully continue to move forward as a culture and society, and figure it out. Because when I'm pretty happy-go-lucky and pretty positive normally, but when I'm stressed or having a down period or whatever, I think way too deeply on the state of everything, and the state of everything when I'm in that mood is like, it's fucking not very good.
I should say at this point that, yeah, look, I mean, I can get like that, and I think as you get older, you get more reflective and you've got a greater time span to compare
Yeah.
eras, so it's easier to fall into that trap. Look, there's plenty about life I enjoy, and there's
for
plenty,
sure.
Plenty
I don't doubt it.
Plenty about
Myself
Australia.
too.
Plenty
Yeah.
about Australia that
Yeah.
I appreciate. The good fortune. I mean, that's another issue about people who sort of say keep everyone else out. Well, you've had the good fortune to be born here. You didn't sort of inherit living here
didn't
by
earn
right. So I appreciate my luck in that extent. To that extent. I do love my sport. I love my music, so I do don't get me wrong here, I do get plenty of pleasure out of life, but I think that these are important considerations that I wish more people would pay some attention to. That's all.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong. I'm in between all this. It's January now. I still spend way too much time, I did it again the other night, flicking the channels, looking for the cricket, and I go past Fox Footy and, there's the 84 grand final again. I must have watched the last quarter of the 84 grand final 500 times. I actually literally know every bit of play in the last quarter of that game. Stuff like that.
So
I'll disappear down a YouTube rabbit hole watching old South Australian grand finals, stuff like that. So I am quite obsessive. But, the point I'm making here is there's still plenty of stuff I enjoy.
Oh, no, for sure. And I don't think anyone that will be listening really thinks that we're pessimistic, negative. It's just...
I get that on Twitter a lot.
Well,
and we haven't really talked about Twitter, and Twitter is a double-edged sword for me. But I do get a lot of that, you're so negative,
Yeah, well, look, you can look at it a number of ways. You can look at it as negative, or you can look at it as people that are having a conversation that needs to be had, we're just... the subtitle or subheading of this podcast is Brolosophy, Philosophy Through the Eyes of an Idiot. But the other subheading is telling interesting and important stories. And I was just, to be honest, this conversation I was interested in your history of making a life out of the passion that you have in football. So narrowed and so whatever. And I was really keen to tell that story. We haven't really touched much on it, but I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. But telling interesting, important stories, there has to be someone doing that so that others can understand what's going on. So I think all we're doing here is we're talking about things that are going on in the world. Yeah. We're not creating these problems. These are issues that really are happening, and we're just raising the point and talking about them, because if nobody does, then nobody does.
Well, don't get me wrong here. I don't want to sound like I'm, sort of full of my own self-importance, but when you get a decent-sized Twitter following, it sort of is possible to put something out there and have people at least think about it. And what's interesting with this is... I always said when I started on Twitter, it's not just going to be footy. I love music. I am interested in the world, blah, blah, blah. And for a long time, and I've made a joke of it, people who disagree with you or whatever, they'll tweet, stick to sport. So these days, as soon as I get one, I retweet it and I just write, ding, ding, there's number one for the day and whatever. Funnily enough, over the last month or so, when my tweeting's been almost exclusively about politics, people have started to say, when I tweet something about the Big Bash game I'm watching or whatever, they go, stick to politics, So it's sort of swung around a bit.
Funny.
But look, I would say, and this applies to anyone in the sports media like myself, sport is an escape. And I understand why people who are right into sport, they don't want to hear about stuff that gets them down and isn't sort of in their wheelhouse or whatever. But I think maybe people who follow sport are people who can most be helped by someone bringing this sort of stuff to their attention. And again, don't get me wrong, it's not that calculated on my part. I see something that interests me or makes me angry or whatever, I tweet something. There's no great thought process goes into it. But I think it's quite possible to be passionate about sport, and I am, and be passionate about the world around you. The two things aren't mutually exclusive,
That's right. You're Rohan Connolly, not Rohan Connolly sport.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're a human being.
Yeah, and I think that as I've got older, in the last few years, that has become more important to me. And I do get shirty when people assume that because you're a sports journo, you don't know anything about anything else. Now, having said all that, we haven't really talked about
we haven't at all.
Footy, have we?
We have no time to. So that's totally fine. But it's all interesting stuff. All that stuff really interests me, and I as soon as you mentioned before the show there was some other stuff you thought would be interesting to talk to, I thought that this might happen. Because it's, to me, with all due respect, it is more important and interesting than sport, Yeah, well, although, I wanted to hear your story and so on and so forth. But it's, I get fired up by that kind of stuff. And again, you kind of said, I think something along these lines, but I really know fuck all about anything. You know, I want to preface that to anyone that's listening to what I say.
I can tell in our brief dealing that's not you selling yourself short there.
Yeah, but, you know, this is it. But as I said, it's philosophy through the eyes of an idiot, you know? So, yeah, cool. Well, I know you got to get out of here at 8:30, Rohan. So I actually, out of all the questions I had about football, I want to actually ask you one football-related question that's got two parts, and that's it.
Good.
So, and then we'll have 5 minutes. We'll plug all your stuff and wrap it up, and we'll get you out of here.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I wanted to ask somebody who's dedicated their whole life to sport is who, in your history of watching AFL football, have been your favourite players? Let's answer that one first.
Okay. How many am I allowed?
5.
Jeez. Okay. Well, for various reasons, Gary Ablett Senior. Mm-hmm. The most gifted footballer I've ever seen. Like he did stuff that no other player I've seen was physically capable of doing. And what am I talking about? Things like snapping goals over his shoulder from 55 metres out. An incredible combination of power and strength and rare athletic gifts. Mm-hmm. Just a football genius. Yep. You know, a bit of a car crash in other ways, unfortunately, but a football genius and just so gifted. So he's certainly one. Other ones tend to be a bit more sentimental. A name that might surprise people. I mentioned the 1984 Grand Final. Mm-hmm. Leon Baker.
Oh, okay.
Came to Essendon at the age of 28. Played in those 84-85 premierships. Mm-hmm. Only played 5 seasons, but one of the neatest, most compact, most efficient footballers I've ever seen. Should have won that Norm Smith medal for his performance in the 84 Grand Final. Kicked 4 goals. The magnificent blind turn, one of the great moments in football.
I don't know Leon Baker.
History. I can't believe you say you're an Essendon supporter.
I knew you would hate that.
Have you not seen highlights of the 84 Grand Final?
I've watched the 84 Grand Final.
Okay, well, the bit where the guy taps the ball in front of himself and blind turns and kicks a goal. That's Leon Baker.
Yeah.
Number 4.
It was years ago.
Educate yourself, Bill. You need to. So, and Tim Watson, another hero of mine, he said Leon was as good a footballer as he ever watched. So, And a great story too, Leon. He was a bit of a hippie and a bit of a football nomad, and he'd played all over the country in Cairns and Bunbury and Perth, and came to Melbourne late, and just had immediate impact. Famously media shy, hardly ever did an interview. Came back here in 2015 for the reunion of those flag sides, and I got to interview him at length. And it was such a great story. It's almost the favourite piece of journalism I've ever done.
Awesome.
So he's a hero. Tim Watson, another hero of mine, Job's dad for some of your vintage.
No. Tim Watson's Tim Watson to me. Well, Job's Tim Watson's son.
Superstar, 4 best and fairest, explosive, powerful player. I saw him play, again, how old I am. I saw him play his first game. Do you know how old he was when he played his first
15.
game? 15 and 10 months. It was out at Waverley in 1977. They played in a draw against Richmond. I was 12. I was sitting there watching it. I had his number on my duffel coat, Tim 32 Watson. Yeah. So he was always a hero of mine. Who else would I talk about? There's 3. In a sort of fan base perspective, they're probably going to be from your club. Who else have I enjoyed watching? Peter Dacos, he played for Collingwood.
Love Peter Dacos. Wasn't
great for Essendon in the 1990 Grand Final, but a bit of a freak around goals. Yep. Manufactured the dribble goals and stuff like that. So amazing to watch. In terms of it's funny. I probably need time to think about Wayne Carey, incredible player. A contemporary of Ablett's. I mean, how lucky. In fact, there was a game on Fox Footy the other night. It was a game between St Kilda and Sydney at the SCG in '94. St Kilda was still 6 goals down with 7 minutes left to play. They got up and won. Plugger Tony Lockett ended up kicking 11 goals. He was amazing to watch. Yeah. And that, I'll say this instead of nominate a particular person. That early 90s era, in fact, there was a podcast done last year called 1993 the greatest season that was.
Yep.
Which I agree with entirely, not just because Essendon won the premiership, but that was almost footy at its peak.
Yep.
It was a professional game, but it was still free-flowing and quite high scoring.
Dunstall, Kernahan, Lockett,
Well,
Ablett.
that's what I was going to say.
Yep.
And the one moment in time you had Ablett, Dunstall, Lockett, Modra, Carey, Sumich, Kernahan, Salmon. You know, it was incredible. I mean, you had 3 guys that season kick over 100 goals. You know, the leading goal kicker these days kicks 60-something.
Yeah.
You know, so...
Tony Modra was... I was an Essendon supporter, but I wrote letters to Tony Modra because he was my favourite player, and they made me a Adelaide junior supporter.
Oh, really?
They just sent me all this Adelaide stuff. I'm like, I don't even fucking go for Adelaide, but I just like Tony Modra so much. I used to write fucking fan letters to him, I think. He was my favourite player.
Again, 93 preliminary final, Essendon Adelaide. Adelaide 42 points up at half-time. Essendon comes back and wins. The single loudest roar I've ever heard at the MCG was in the third quarter of that game. And anyone listening who's an Essendon fan, probably maybe a bit older than you, will know the moment I'm talking about. It was like the whole ground was about to collapse, so loud was the roar as Essendon came back. Those moments are sort of my fondest memories, I think, of football, both in an aesthetic watching the game sense, but also professionally. I mean, to be able to, sit there in the press box, the MCG, best seats in the house, writing about your team winning a premiership, it doesn't get a lot better than that. It's been a long time since I had that memory, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, and you got 1 minute to answer this one because we want to get you out of here on time. Who's the best player of all time, AFL footy? You only get one.
Look, I would say Ablett. Now, I need to qualify that. He doesn't have the best record, but he did stuff that no other player I've ever seen was capable of doing.
Yep.
So that, for me, is the best definition of best. Someone who
Higher
did stuff...
peak.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And, have a look at his highlight reel. Have a look at him kicking 14 goals against Essendon at the MCG in a losing side.
Yep.
In fact, that was a great story I didn't get the chance to tell you. It was about ghosting a column by Gary Ablett for the Sunday Age. That was a bizarre experience.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we can do that another time.
Yeah. Well, we probably need to get you in and actually talk about footy, Rowan. I wanted to tell you about my footy career. I've won one senior premiership when I was playing.
Oh, well done.
And
who
we were
with?
For Rye.
Oh, okay.
Rye Footy Club, Mornings
okay.
Peninsula. And we actually were 43 points down in the halfway through the second. No, this is in the prelim though.
Oh.
Halfway through the second quarter of the prelim.
Yeah.
And we stormed home, won by 3 points, and then we beat the undefeated reigning premiers by 3 points.
Was that Sorrento?
Nah, Langwarren.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but Sereno were always our big rivals, and
Yeah.
Sereno have been pumping the last 10 years. Obviously, they've been winning all the flags.
Yeah.
Lots of my mates play at Sereno and Franks and YCW. They've been very successful.
Yeah.
Local footy-wise. But I don't play anymore. I haven't played for years. But, all right, cool. So, Rowan, where can people find you if they want to find more of your footy stuff, your writings? They want to fucking send you some hate on Twitter. Like, where you got time to plug some stuff before we wrap it up?
All right, so Twitter, my handle on Twitter is at Rohan Connolly, so ROHAN _ Connolly, CONNOLLY. I'll usually tell you to FRO if you abuse me or whatever and either mute you or block you, but there'll be some sort of interaction. So you can find me there. The website is just footyology.com.au. I've got to be honest, it's been a bit quiet of late because it's off-season and haven't had much going on there.
For sure.
The podcast I'd like to push because I love doing that with Mark Fine, who... was a very popular host on 1116 SEN where I worked for 8 years. And we didn't even talk about the radio stuff. Finey and I do that podcast together. During the season, we do 2 a week, Thursday and Sunday nights, preview and review. But we've kept it going off season too. So we've got a summer edition one, which we record on a Monday morning. We have different segments, but we don't just talk about the footy and sport on that. We do a thing called Life Hacks, where we just 3 random observations, something that's interested us during the week.
Yep.
We do a thing called Vinyl and Video, where we pick a year and go back and revisit our favourite music, movies and TV of that year. We do the Rant Off, where we just sort of do a go berserk, something that's annoyed us or whatever. We have a bit of fun with it. So
it's good.
It's going all right. So, I'd love anyone who hasn't heard that, please give it a listen. It's on iTunes, Spotify,
all the
podcast platforms. I upload it onto the Footyology website, so you can find it there. I tweet it out and put it on Facebook as well. Beyond that, where can you find me? Well, because it's January, I'm still sort of working out what my schedule for this year is going to look like.
Yep.
I have the last couple of years done some work for Essendon Football Club, radio. Most recently, I've been on 3AW doing footy with them. I'm not sure what's happening this year yet, so I can't sort of say definitively I'm doing that. I've written for various websites. I'm sort of in the process of negotiating that at the moment. But yeah, look, I took a voluntary redundancy from the Age end of June 2017, set up the Footyology website. It's pretty hard running and maintaining and monetising an independent website, I can tell you. So
for sure,
there is a donation facility on that, which feel free to use.
Well, that's how a lot of creators make their money though these days.
Well, people say to me, "Why aren't you on Patreon?"
Yep.
And I just decided to do it this way. But look, I would say in a broader sense, I think the future of the media is going to increasingly be about niche media.
Yep.
And I think that's a good thing. I think the more we can break down those monolithic media organisations and get a variety of views, and increasingly the most informed views, I think, are coming from independent media sources.
Yep.
So it's important that people support those initiatives. So, if I could sort of give a little plug, I guess that would be it.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Rohan, that was a fascinating conversation. Didn't talk fuck all about footy.
No, but
thanks for coming on the show.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. And to your listeners, thanks for putting up with me.
Yeah, no worries. All right, and that's a wrap.